Well, all right, YouTube fans. I waited patiently for to get a decent amount of news. So I didn't want to just give little bits and pieces, but now we officially have a whole ton of news about the Godzilla anime, which from now on we will be calling by the official title Godzilla Monster Planet. And on the film's official website, they've actually told us now the official premise of the story and a whole lot of other things about it, as well as releasing a brand new image of the film's main hero, well, I should say protagonist, I should say, the character who was, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but the character is called, get this, Haru. Well, I mean, any Godzilla fan in the world knows what that refers to. Of course, Haru Nakajima, the suit actor who played Godzilla for over half of the Showa films, I believe up to the early 70s films. I believe his last may have been something like Destroy All Monsters or maybe even Godzilla's Revenge. But in any case, that is pretty awesome. And as I read the story, I was very, very, very impressed with the premise. Get this, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, because I don't want to read just word for word. But the story itself is sounds freaking amazing. Get this. The story is that at first the movie does indeed take place on Earth. However, kind of like it reminds me kind of Final Wars, the premise of at least the first part of it, that human beings have been ravaged by a war with kaiju for over half a century. It's kind of like the half century war. I like that little. I don't know if it's official nod, but I just like that little way they said half century war they had with kaiju, and the most devastating of all was Godzilla, who they said, and I want to quote this, says, the ultimate existence that destroys all monsters, Godzilla. So, man, so that means I'm guessing we're going to see plenty of other monsters in this, but Godzilla will probably be the strongest one of them all, who's killed not only humans, but other monsters. This Godzilla already sounds like a real nightmare to deal with. And this part of the plot that gets into the next really takes it to new science fiction heights. I mean, these movies have always had to do with aliens or whatnot, at least in some of the cheesier ones. But this really makes it really interesting. So apparently, the government at the time made plans to just get the hell off of Earth. This is around 2048. And apparently, this is another interesting thing. As an AI managed under the central government decided who would be allowed to leave Earth and head to a new planet, which was several light years away. So I already, I'll get back to the end. I just wanted to talk about this plot. And so, anyways, the government decides, well, the computer, under the government decides who can live and leave Earth, basically. And they take all this time to go to another planet, and they finally make it. However, the planet, unfortunately, is not biologically compatible with humans. I guess the readouts from the computers were wrong in their data, and now humanity is basically in the ultimate hard place because now the planet they're invested so much money and time going to is now not an option, and now they have to head back to Earth. And now the only option left is to take Earth back from the monsters, namely Godzilla. And but this is where, if that's not interesting enough, this is where it gets even better. Okay. Anyways, this is where it gets even better. That when they get to Earth, as we all know, time is relative. So all the time they spent traveling to that planet they were going to originally go to, and then back to Earth, means a whole 20,000 years has passed on Earth, with the ecosystem, as it says, and I quote, reigned by Godzilla. And it ends with this. The question is, at the end, will humans begin to win back to Earth, and what will Haru see beyond his fate? Okay, that is a pretty impressive premise. I mean, wow. It reminds me a lot of like Attack on Titan, meets Godzilla Final Wars slash Half Century War, the amazing comic book, one of my favorite Godzilla comics. And I don't know, kind of like maybe like Paul Verhoeven's. Well, I'm probably slowing down last name, but the movie Starship Troopers kind of reminds you of that. It's a little bit, but this is truly an amazing concept. I mean, wow. I mean, you could tell from the artwork that it was already be a futuristic movie, but this is just, what can I say? They really outdid themselves. That is an incredible premise. And what I'm really hoping for is that this is a nice long movie, because such an incredible premise like that does not deserve to be wrapped up in like an hour length movie. Because I know that animes and OVAs are, they can be really hard to get down the process of how it's going to look and the budget and how much they can afford to do. And that usually has to do with time constraints. I mean, as an example, I use something like the Hellsing Ultimate OVA, which to me, I still love the Hellsing anime as well, but the Hellsing OVA to me is far superior because it has better looking art, in my opinion, and there's a little more story to it, at least after you once get past OVA 1. But in any case, those release pretty much year by year. So you waited a whole year to get usually around about an hour's worth of material. But of course, when we get down to it, most of the OVAs were actually around 45 minutes, 55 minutes. So a little under an hour. Although as they progressed and got closer to the end, some of them were actually a full-on hour. I think the very last one was just a little over an hour. So it takes a while if you want to get down right, because the last thing anybody wants to see, and I'll use Dragon Ball Super as an example, and don't get me wrong, I love Dragon Ball Super. I mean, even though the first two arcs were just redone versions of the first two movies that we got, I think overall the show is fantastic and it keeps getting better arc per arc. But the first two arcs did suffer from really bad art sometimes, and I'm not just holding that against Super really, because Dragon Ball Z, as nostalgic people tend to keep forgetting, is that even Dragon Ball Z had days where its art was pretty bad, and that's because of a rapid pace and budget that is stretched out probably too much more than it should, which is why I'm so glad with Dragon Ball Super. As the arcs keep going and going, there are less episodes that look as bad, you know. I'm not going to get a whole Dragon Ball Z Super debate right now, but the point of the matter is, the more time and money they have to invest in the anime itself, the less chance there's going to be bad shots, like, oh, that animation could have been better there, could have moved more realistically, stuff like that, which is very important. So with that being said, that brings up another important point that the website told us about. The website told us this movie will be coming out this year, because I was a little apprehensive. Like, there's no marketing at all. Well, there's a little bit of marketing. We know more and more about it little by little, but no trailer or anything. And that's because now we know the movie is coming out November of this year. Whether it be near the end or beginning of November doesn't really matter, because that's November. It's a few months from now, but that time will fly by as we wait, and a bunch of movies are coming out in the meantime. So we know for sure now it is coming out this year by November, so we could probably expect a trailer, an official trailer, I guess, probably by summer. Maybe May, but definitely June or July, because they're going to need to start marketing the hell out of it. But there was another announcement also, which I think I announced before anyways, but March 26th, which is this Sunday, at an anime festival, whatever, they're going to be showing some kind of presentation about the movie. Now, whether that's going to be, clips, or maybe just a drawing of what some of the monsters look like, or more of the alien, not the alien, the human weapons, I don't really know, and we'll wait to see that on Sunday. We'll probably get the official update on that by Monday, I guess, what exactly they showed. So they are, like I said, they're going to be slowly ramping up marketing and showing us more and more this very, very, very interesting world. And it can go in a whole lot of directions. Like I said, I'm astounded by the premise. I think it's great. I like the little emblems they added there about that's what reminded me so much of Attack on Titan because anyone who's watched Attack on Titan remembers that very first episode is pretty much it sounds a lot like this in a way. Human beings knew of the Titans long before they encountered them again over 100 years later. So they already knew of them, but they assumed they lived in relative peace within these walls. And then Titans attacked again, and then, much suffering ensued. Not only during the initial attack, but also the government themselves were just complete assholes, and did things like there were food shortages. So they sent out tons of people to go look for new ways to live out in the wild. And of course, a lot of people were killed, soldiers and civilians alike. So that's a good thing about Attack on Titan, which I love it so much, both the anime and the manga, especially in the manga, though, if you keep on reading, that the government itself is a pretty big enemy of the common good, almost as much as the Titans themselves, really. So the fact that this has, you know, elements of that with the humans letting a computer decide who can leave Earth is a pretty interesting nod to that type of really shady government type in the story. And that brings up another interesting question. So the humans were basically gone from Earth for 20,000 years, but not all of them. Some of them did indeed survive on, well, we don't, that's the thing we don't know. Some of them were left behind, though, when the majority of humans left for the other planet. So the question then becomes, did any humans survive after those 20,000 years, or are they all just completely wiped out? Although I honestly want to say after 20,000 years of getting destroyed by kaiju, I would think that the humans would still actually be around, but they probably would not have any, major cities or any more technological innovations. If anything, they'll probably be living like cavemen and probably reverted back to that. They just kind of just live off the land and just stay out of the monsters' wake. Yeah, because there's no way you can have a city on a planet that's ruled by monsters after 20,000 years of it. And I really want to see more of what that 20,000-year-old Earth under Godzilla's rule looks like. And it brings up so many questions, like what monsters will we see? Because there's bound to be other monsters. Another interesting point, because it's often been said in the Godzilla movies that Godzilla walked Earth forever. It's never implied that he ages or anything like that. So will Godzilla's look change initially? Because I'm assuming we'll get some kind of view of what the Earth looked like before they all left. So by the time after 20,000 years have passed, will Godzilla's look have changed? Will he have gotten bigger? Will he have grown bigger spikes or something like that? Will he actually age? Will he have offspring? Uh, who knows? These are all very interesting questions that I'm dying to get the answers to. I must say, I mean, compared to all the really good movies coming out this year, this was more on the back burner for me. I still really wanted to see it, but there was so little information about it. I was not saying forgetting about it, but it was in the back of my mind. But now it's at the forefront, and I'm just really anxious to see where they're going to take this. And honestly, I'm either hoping for a 2-hour movie, which I kind of highly doubt, but I mean, it's not impossible. But there's been plenty of anime movies, I'm sure, that were, over the hour, 40-minute mark, something like that, that were released theatrically worldwide. Because what I don't want, and don't get me wrong, once again, I love the Dragon Ball Z movies, Battle of Gods and Resurrection of F, and those are actually a lot longer than most standard movies in the Dragon Ball Z franchise. Were like 45 minutes, usually flat, basically a little longer than your average episode of Dragon Ball Z. So what I don't want is like, an hour long, or even I don't want an hour and 30-minute long movie, because that would not do this awesome premise justice. Really wouldn't. Hell, if you want to do an hour 30-minute one, make it a two-parter, like The Dark Knight Returns did. When they adapted Frank Miller's story for the big screen, that was one of the best DC animated films they've ever made, because it took an already great story and they expanded on it without cutting too much of anything that was vital to the story. In fact, I would have to watch them again. I do own both of them. I've watched them many times. But I don't think they cut out really anything for story. In fact, they only added scenes to it, which made it even better. And they made it into a two-parter because, yeah, if you had made it into one movie, you would have had to cut a lot, because the standard animation movies that come on straight to DVD, of course, are always your standard, like, 90 minutes, Actually, no. For usually DC films, they're actually even shorter, like 70 minutes usually. That's like the basic runtime you need. You know, it's not their fault. It's all about budget and time constraints. So I understand. But I think making this a two-parter would probably be the best way to go, unless, of course, you're going to make a really long movie out of it, which I doubt it will get anything over 2 hours. But then again, Shin Gojira was the first Godzilla movie, other than Final Wars, which kind of had to be 2 hours because it was the end of the series and multiple monsters. But we all know how that went. But Shin Gojira took the premise of just having just one monster and actually made it into a 2 hour movie, which I really enjoyed. I think giving a 2 hour runtime leaves you so much room to explore the biology of the creature and the characters and the social political settings of the world they're in, that it's interesting. And since Shin Gojira did all that exploring, of politics and all that stuff like that, within a world that we still very much recognize, and that we really did a great job of making it seem just like our world, except now there's a giant monster in it. But the themes are pretty relevant to what's going on right now. And since Godzilla Monster Planet will be exploring an entirely different world than we live in, at least to a certain extent, it's only right that they get enough time to explore that world. And so far, we only have news of one character, Haru, but I'm really anxious to see what the other characters are going to be like. Maybe we meet some shady government officials who, it was their plan all along to come back to Earth, or who knows what, or maybe, even though I highly doubt it, but maybe on Earth when they get back, there'll be people who are still resisting Godzilla some way, somehow. But the whole thing seems freaking amazing. Like I said, this is like Attack on Titan, Godzilla Final Wars, at least the initial premise, and nothing but, hopefully. Godzilla and the monsters, humans at that point lived in a world where there were always monsters, And Godzilla Final Wars, no one's surprised to see, Rodan and Ebra and all these monsters attacking. The only thing they're surprised about is that they're all attacking all at once. But also, there's elements of, like, say, Starship Troopers, and even I think some bit of aliens, which I definitely think we're gonna get the vibe of that. The whole humans come in to this alien environment, which ironic enough is Earth, and as James Cameron said about aliens when he was making, he wanted it to be Vietnam in space, and I think that's kind of the thing we're gonna get with this movie, because they're gonna arrive back on Earth that's very unfamiliar to them, might as well be an alien planet, and they're gonna be facing monsters. Of course, they're a lot bigger than a xenomorph, and yeah, probably just a little more dangerous. Because unless they're bringing brand new weaponry, I don't know if they're going to get any different results than they did 20,000 years ago. But that's enough gushing over that. I mean, it just sounds spectacular. When there's a trailer, I will definitely be covering that, and I'm pretty sure there'll be more updates, probably by, like I said, by Monday after that whole exhibition that they're going to have. So that's all for now, guys. Remember, it's called Godzilla Monster Planet, and it's going on November 2017. And just be looking forward to it. Also, another update. Uh, Actually, I'll cover this in a different video. I don't want to go on for too long, but yeah, guys, Godzilla Monster Planet. If you want to read the full summary of the premise, including the names of the ships and the planet they're going to, you can look at the Godzilla, the official website for the film, and also Anime News Network, which is where I read my summary of it from. Because I'm pretty sure the original website is in Japanese, although if you use certain browsers, of course, you can translate it. But the Anime News Network website translated it pretty damn well. So you want to read the full summary, yeah, but like I said, with the ship names and planet names and everything else, go ahead and check it out. And that's all for me, guys.